Good evening, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining us for our Transit Town Hall. I'm Rawlson King, City Councillor for Rideau-Rockcliffe Ward, and I'm joined this evening by my good friends and colleagues, Ariel Troster, Councillor for Somerset Ward, and Councillor Stephanie Plante, Councillor for Rideau-Vanier Ward, and our collective office staff members. Thank you for joining my colleagues and myself, along with our office staff, to review the results of our transit use survey for those who live or work in wards 12, 13, and 14, and to discuss what more can be done to ensure that we enhance and create more reliable transit service that we can trust. But before we begin, I'd like to thank you for joining this Zoom meeting. Though we're meeting virtually, I'd like to acknowledge that the land that we're on in Ottawa is built upon unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, and the City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Now I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. We will be recording this session for the public record. So if you want to maintain your privacy, please keep your video off. To see the person who's speaking, select speaker view instead of gallery view. At this time, we're going to invite you to turn on your cameras if you're willing to pose for a very short photo that we will use on social media. We are really proud of the fact that we brought so many people together. And if you are willing, please turn on your video so that we can see your wonderful smile and we can take a quick photo. Excellent. Thank you so much. We'd also ask you to please place your microphone on mute until we invite you to ask a question. There will be an opportunity for questions to be asked directly by video, and we'll also be taking questions and receiving comments in the chat. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Councillor Troster.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for turning on your cameras for a moment there. It was so nice to see all your faces. I want to thank you all for filling out our transit survey. This is a really great opportunity to take a look at a wide swath of urban Ottawa, and also to really build on the work that we've been doing at the council table as colleagues to make sure that we have those vital connections. So we had more than 600 responses, which shows this discussion is important. And we knew this when we sent out the survey. We know how frustrated you are about delays and about buses not coming. And every time a bus doesn't come, that has huge implications on your lives. And as you'll see with the survey, we know there's a lot of frustration out there. But I think this is a good place to start when we start talking about how we want to improve transit in our downtown core. And we're holding this meeting together because transit moves throughout the city in all of our wards. If there's a delay in Somerset ward, that means there's going to be a delay in Councillor King and Councillor Plante's ward too. I just want to add that this survey is not an exact science. The results are based on you, the users, and that we're taking that into consideration, which is why we are here tonight. Because we want to hear about why you answered the way you did, so we can start to build public support for the kind of changes that we want to see to our transit system. Thank you. Now over to Councillor Plante en français.
Bonsoir tout le monde, j'espère que vous allez bien. Merci d'être les nôtres ce soir. Comme vous savez, on est tous passionnés par le transport en commun. Si vous prenez le bus ou si vous prenez le train léger, on veut vraiment améliorer vos trajets si vous le prenez à chaque jour ou quelques fois par semaine. Je voulais juste premièrement remercier le staff OC Transpo qui est là avec nous ce soir. Je sais que vous avez des familles, des obligations, mais vous êtes parmi nous et on est très reconnaissants. Et on aimerait surtout remercier le staff dans nos bureaux du quartier Somerset, Rideau-Rockcliffe et Rideau-Vanier. Je sais qu'ils ont travaillé très, très fort pour que nous ayons non seulement la logistique pour ce soir, mais les résultats pour discuter avec vous. Et dernièrement, j'aimerais aussi reconnaître le groupe des usagers de transport commun d'Ottawa parce qu'ils ont fait beaucoup de promotion pour non seulement le sondage, mais pour notre rencontre ce soir. Et je sais qu'ils militent très, très fort pour le transport en commun au sein de la capitale nationale. Alors, merci. Et pour toute la gang qui est ici de Rideau-Vanier, je vous vois, vous êtes de tous les coins de mon quartier et j'espère qu'on ait des bons résultats ce soir. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. And before we receive a presentation concerning the results of the councillor's survey, we'd like to also take this opportunity to briefly hear from OC Transpo staff who have joined this call. So I'd like to introduce both Pat Scrimger, the Director of Transit Customer Systems and Planning at OC Transpo, along with Scott Leberge, Associate Director of Transit Services Department.
Thanks, Councillor, and hello, everybody. We're very happy to be here to hear the things you're speaking to the councillors about tonight. My name is Pat. As the councillor said, he gave my title, but what it means is that I look after the group at OC Transpo who look after planning and budgeting the service, the customer service aspects, the technology aspects, and also some of the strategic plans that we're doing. Scott Leberge is here with us this evening also. He'll say a little more later on. He's working alongside me as part of a staff development program. He's been working at OC Transpo for a year and really, in that time, really knows some of the issues that are confronting us. I'd also like to mention, I don't see her on the screen right now, Amanda Blanchfield, who's here, and she's leading the bus route review, which you will hear about later on as well. I'll leave it in your hands and in the councillor's hands how much you want to hear from us, if you do at all. If you're interested, I can give you some information on what's holding us back from providing the transit service that we want, that you want. There are some things and that just constrain us in the current pandemic influenced time. But I think, we can show you, I can tell you, but I hope we can show you in any of the things that we do and we say that all of us, all 3,000 plus of us who work at OC Transpo are always more than 100% committed to providing an excellent transit service to everyone in Ottawa. And we're always disappointed when anything holds us back from doing that. So thanks, Councillor, and I'll turn it back to you.
We appreciate those comments, and we know that you will be returning during this town hall to provide some more input and to talk about the directions in terms of public consultation that OC Transpo is going to undertake. At this time, I think it's time for the main event. So we will have our survey results presentation that will be provided by our collective staff. And I know we'll be thanking them at the end of the presentation, but I always thank staff profusely. If we look good, it's because of the tremendous amount of work that our staff undertake on our behalf. And they've done a wonderful job with this survey. And now they're going to show us the results. So we thank them for that, and we look forward to this presentation.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Karina, I think you're going to kick us off.
Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Karina. I work with Councillor Plante, and I'm going to get us started on this survey, the moment that you've all been waiting for to see the results of the survey that you filled out. So we can go ahead and move to the next slide. This is just a brief breakdown of the agenda for the whole call tonight. So here we are at number 2, results of the survey. And following the results of the survey, we'll be hearing from you. And of course, we have our 3 lovely councillors here who are all with us tonight. And we're so grateful for that. And you can move right along. So we had really good engagement with this survey. We were really happy to receive a very satisfying number of 600 responses. And you can see here, this is sort of a wide overview of where all of our responses came from. And in the next slide, you can see that the majority of our responses came from the downtown core in the 3 wards of the 3 councillors that are represented here tonight. This was just a snapshot of all of the different postal codes that people provided us with.
Okay, great. So the first question that we had in our survey, and as Councillor Troster briefly mentioned, we are not professional pollsters, so we were using Microsoft Forms. So we are going to sprinkle our comments with a grain of salt throughout the evening. But this one was fairly straightforward. How often do you take public transit? And you can see here that far and away, number 1, multiple times per week, followed by multiple times per month, with daily coming in third. And we think that's a great snapshot. It certainly reflects my personal experience living downtown. Transit's not a daily experience. You don't necessarily need it every day. We've got a lot of things in our community, and we are relying on transit perhaps more circumstantially than the rest, than other places in the city. We also, from this other responses that we had 17 people write in their own response, and some of those included multiple comments about taking transit specifically on Wednesdays and Sundays when it's free for seniors. Some folks one person who said that they were a daily user for 13 years, but they had to scale back. They scaled back to only using it a few times a month after the route optimizations, which they term as service reductions, and the LRT issues that began in 2019. And I'll go back to Karina for the next slide.
So the second question was, utilisez-vous paratranspo, or are you a paratranspo user? And most of the people that responded to our survey were not paratranspo users. However, some responses indicated that some people use paratranspo seasonally. So they might use OC Transpo during the summer, but during the winter when there's snow on the ground, then they go to paratranspo depending on their mobility needs. So it's just interesting to note that there is not exclusive use of either service. There's circumstantial or seasonal use of both in some cases.
And the next question, why do you take paratranspo? Or sorry, excuse me, transit. I need to move the chat so that it's not popping up while I'm looking at the screen. So the highest response here was to run errands or attend appointments, closely followed by attend social engagements. And coming in, the third reason people selected was to get to work. It's important to note that people could select multiple options on this question. So those obviously do not total up to the 600 responses that we received. But again, there's a higher trend for more circumstantial, as the first question indicated. People might not be daily users in the core. There's a higher tendency to rely on transit for one-off or circumstantial occasions, such as running an errand, going to a doctor's appointment, attending a social engagement. We infer from this that retaining off-peak service is very important for folks in the core, and that there's not so much of a reliance on that commuter model for our wards. We also, just as a side note, found it interesting how highly ranked environment and sustainability reasons were. that was, I think that was a bit of a surprise to us. It's really, it was highly noted. I think about that's close to half of respondents noted that as one of the motivating factors for them to choose transit. And I think that's the main summary.
So, quels sont les principaux circuits que vous empruntez? What are the main routes that you take? This was sort of an open question, and so we didn't narrow it down to just bus routes. So people wrote LRT in a million different ways. Another example of how we are not professional pollsters. But there was a very diverse range of answers to this question. People put in one bus route number, they put in 3 or 7 bus route numbers that they use. And we've sent the full list of responses to this question to OC Transpo, so they have that full information. Yeah, on to the next question.
So this is the first of 2 questions that I think it's important to note that these are questions that we asked folks to rank their concerns, and they did appear in a default order. And based on just speaking to a few people who did fill out the survey, we have reason to believe that not everybody ranked every question. So some of the weight of those questions may be dependent on the default position that they were in. However, we can tell that people did move them a lot. So we do think that there is still value in this. And based on, as you can see here, 2 very related items: reliability of service and availability of service, which we defined as time of day. We're far and away the top 2. 63% of respondents chose reliability of the service as their top concern. And whereas time of day service and availability was chosen first, just 13% of the time, though it may have ranked, may rank highly because people chose it second or third, a significant percent of the time. On to the next question.
And how often is an alternative mode of transportation more convenient than taking public transit? I know for myself in the core, I don't have a 15-minute neighborhood, but I have a 30-minute neighborhood, so I can walk almost everywhere in about 30 minutes, which is I'm so grateful for. So most people seem to have had a similar experience answering daily. And if you can remember back to question 1, the highest percentage of people responded that they take the bus multiple times a day or multiple times a week, not every day. And so for that reason, people answering how often is an alternative mode of transportation more convenient, it could be interpreted that every time they need to take the bus, it's more convenient actually to take a different form of transportation. And that could have been just an inference on our part. Not everyone could have interpreted the question that way, but we still thought it was valuable to point out that that's a possibility. Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie, for the next question.
So this one was about timeliness, buses sticking to their schedules. How often does your bus arrive more than 5 minutes outside of its scheduled time? I know when we created the survey, we did debate about how to phrase that question, because we did want to capture, what we were trying to capture was predictability, was if you arrive at a stop at a given time, your bus will arrive more or less at the same time. So 5 minutes outside of scheduled time could mean early, could mean late. Again, we anticipate there may have been a little bit of confusion between if somebody's taking the bus only multiple times a week and the bus isn't arriving on time multiple times a week. That could mean daily for your perspective, daily usage. If I had a chance to do the survey over, I would probably write these as percentages of time rather than percentages of time of use rather than daily, multiple times a week. But this is a learning experience on our end as well. We did have some people who wrote in the other section who did say 75% of the time, 50% of the time that I use the bus. We also, again, had some people pointing out that they only take buses on specific days of the week, like Wednesdays and Sundays when it's free for seniors. Some people saying every single time I use it. Other folks, one that was pointed out was that their bus will generally arrive early and not wait until its scheduled time, and that makes it difficult for them to plan their schedule. On to the next one.
So, qu'est-ce qui vous permettrait d'utiliser plus facilement le transport en commun? What would make taking public transit easier for you? So the options, more frequent service and improved notifications were by far the top two choices. And if we relate this back to reliability, which is a big concern for a lot of people, we can infer that people are still struggling to plan their trips around when they can expect the bus to arrive. This is sort of interesting for people that are attending non-work appointments where timing can be more specific. And interestingly, the option number 3, lower fares, it was a little bit controversial because overall it ranks relatively high, but 32% of people ranked it last. So it seems like there was a big divide over whether people thought that was important to them or not. Next slide. Thanks.
Question 9. Great. So this one was a write-in option. So we've just chosen a few that we thought were interesting. Do you feel there are gaps in the coverage of the public transit network? Some of them are very specific. Some of them we did see a lot of people pointing out issues with interprovincial connections, people pointing out concerns about getting to recreation like Mooney's Bay and Britannia Bay if you live in the core. Ottawa Humane Society I found really interesting. It's an important resource, and if you don't have a vehicle, it's really important to make sure that you can access it. And there was different comments about school routes as well, particularly junior high and high school routes where kids are able to take the bus independently to school, making sure that those routes are reliable for them when they might have fewer alternatives if their transit doesn't work out. And there were also comments about accessing groceries, other necessities, and the variance in frequency. Again, we've sent all of this raw data, the Excel spreadsheet that we pulled, so the full amount of comments, which there were over 300 write-in comments on gaps in coverage. That's all been sent to OC Transpo. And we can go on to the next slide.
So we're going to open the floor to you now, to the audience. I'm going to turn it over to Councillor King to moderate the discussion. And then there's just one slide that we'll bring back at the end of the discussion that has a bit more information about OC Transpo's consultations.
Thank you so much, especially for that excellent work that was undertaken on the survey. I know that on top of regular duties, staff was working very hard collectively on gathering, collating this data for the benefit of our offices so that we can continue to make policy decisions through wide-ranging consultation. That doesn't stop, obviously, with just a survey. As you can imagine, our offices get a tremendous amount of correspondence all the time around transit, and we are going back and forth with people on an ongoing basis. And as you can imagine, we are talking with multiple groups, whether they're advocacy groups or community associations as well, who are continually providing us input. But now is the time for you to provide us with input. So I'm really pleased to invite questions and comments from attendees right now. I will be taking questions both from the floor. So if you want to raise your virtual hand, we will entertain your questions. Due to the number of people on the call, though, we will ask that you try to contain your comments to maybe 3 minutes, and hopefully, if there's a question there, both councillors, your respective councillors, as well as OC Transpo staff are on the call, and we will try to take a crack at some of your questions. So I will start with those who have raised their hands. And in the list that I have, Derek raised his hand first. So please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Councillor. So reliability was listed as the #1 issue for riders. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a $39 million hole in the transit budget right now. How do we see that impacting reliability?
Well, I might take a first stab at it. I see that Ariel is also unmuted herself, but I would say that personally, from a political perspective, I didn't think that was the best decision, which is one of the reasons why I voted against the portion of the transit budget, because I personally think that we need to be ensuring that we continue to invest dollars into the service so that we can address the challenges that I have heard, at least from my constituents, around frequency, dependability, as well as the need to expand interconnection to the new LRT network. And I actually have community members who have reached out to me and have asked for the restoration of services, as example, in Wateridge Village. They're asking for a greater frequency on the bus routes through Overbrook, New Edinburgh, and Rockcliffe Park. So the reality is that these are political decisions. I think the good news is that we will have a process that will examine the bus network, and OC Transpo staff will be talking about that at the latter part of this presentation, where there will be the capacity for the public to provide input and for councillors to provide input that we are hearing from our residents. And so it is my expectation to after this process is undertaken with the survey, and when we receive your inputs, we will also be providing written comments. I'm certain all of our offices will be to OC Transpo in that process. So this is just the beginning, but we hear you, and I fully agree with your assessment that we actually need politically to make that decision to put more resources into our transit system. And I'll let my colleagues as well to this.
Yeah, I mean, I also voted against that portion of the budget. I dissented on it as well, because look, here's the reality with transit. Fare box revenues are way down. They've been down since the pandemic, and they never recovered anywhere to the level that we hoped they would. There's been a shift to remote work, but I think it's a mistake to cut routes, because then buses become less reliable. If we want to restore confidence in the service, it needs to be reliable. We need that frequency. So that is why I dissented. I think, based on my previous experience working for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the other thing that I can tell you is that other levels of government don't want to fund operating costs. They want to fund capital. They want to fund big, shiny projects. And so when I worked at FCM, we were begging for more money to backstop transit operating, because that is where cities are just bleeding money. So it is a really tough situation to be in. So my understanding, and again, I will leave that to OC Transpo staff later to talk about what they truly believe the obstacles are to improving reliability. But I think we have to make big decisions as a city. We either cut or we invest. And I think if we want to increase uptake, we need to invest. And I also definitely heard during the campaign from many, many, many seniors who only took the bus on Wednesdays and Sundays. So, you know, for the average rider, reliability might be the top concern, but, you know, I represent the ward with the highest rate of poverty among seniors, and it really was an issue for them, the cost. So I know it might be frustrating for us to just keep saying we hear you, but Rawlson and I, Councillor King and I both voted against that, the capital portion of the OC Transpo budget, because I think we needed to be putting more resources into the service and not less. So, but frankly, the results of this survey will be really, really helpful to feed that feedback up the chain when it comes to budget 2024. I don't know if Pat, if you want to comment on the barriers to increasing reliability from your perspective.
Sure, thanks, Councillor. I can say that the decision by council to count on $39 million coming from the senior levels of government, as has happened over the last few years, is consistent with what other cities across Ontario are expecting. But that in and of itself is not holding us back on reliability of service, because we have an approved budget by council, which, yes, it has that what you describe as a whole, or what council might describe as an expectation, but we still have authority from council to spend all of the money, and we're using that money now to provide the level of service that council's decided. But most of all, what we're doing is we're increasing our staff size. We're hiring more operators continuously. We've hired, I think I've got the numbers here, but it's several hundred new bus operators started last year, and several dozen licensed mechanics as well. And that continues. We've got a need for about 360 more operators this year to cover attrition and people who are going to get promoted and take other jobs as the new O train that you see over my shoulder opens later in the year. We really fell behind on our staffing during the pandemic. A lot of people retired. A lot of people at that point weren't ready to go and start a career in transit. That's turned around in the last year. We've got a lot of people coming in, and our reliability numbers are really, they're not where we want them to be yet, but they're really, really getting much better than they were. I think the worst they were at was probably, coming up on 2 years ago, sort of the summer of 21. We had really just dramatically not enough staff, and now we're pretty close to having enough people to run all the service that we plan to run. And then that runs us into the other things that get in the way, traffic congestion and things changing on the street. But more operators to drive the buses, more mechanics to keep the buses in good shape are our number one and number two things. And that's what we're working really hard on. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you for that response, and just wanted to ensure that Councillor Plante had a chance to intervene if she elects to.
Well, I have an interesting situation in my ward, because I have the LRT too. I have 3 stops of LRT, whereas I'm not sure Rawlson or Ariel Ariel, how many do you have? You have 3, right, as well? You have Parliament.
And I have 1 with St. Laurent.
Right.
Parliament, Lion, and Pimlico. Yeah, I have 3. Yeah.
Right. So I have an interesting situation where I have a very big bus need on one end of the ward with Vanier, and then I have sort of the LRT, let's say, issues on the other end of the ward. So balancing those two is an interesting conundrum. But just from, I would say, the correspondence in my inbox, the east end going towards Vanier is where we want to focus our efforts to make sure that the bus service is more reliable, that we can get, especially the down Montreal Road, we have some delays often, which is why we called this town hall today with the 2 councillors, because it's not just like a delay in my ward, it's delays coming from both ends. So I was a bit surprised by that, to be honest. I thought the LRT complaints would be a lot more heavy, but I can confirm that there's way more emphasis on the east end in terms of going to Vanier, and more issues there. Also, by the way, with students who need to go outside of the ward to places like Gloucester, Immaculata, Lester B. Pearson, those high school routes are an ongoing issue. Rawlson, I see you nodding your head. I know you know. So I actually met with the trustee, all my school trustees 2 days ago to chat about this. So we will be having more discussions around the bus routes to high schools, because getting those kids there on time. It's not even an issue of, the bus may come on time, but again, there may be traffic that causes the delay. And if the bus isn't on time, they often miss their connection to get to school on time. So a lot of complicated issues that involve wards that are not mine, but start in mine and move elsewhere. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Amanda has her hand raised.
Sorry, I just had a challenge on muting myself there. Thanks so much. So I'm Amanda Rosenstock. I'm a Vanier resident, and I just wanted to thank you so much, councillors, for convening this meeting. It's really, really important. So I have a question actually for city staff. Has there been any consideration as to whether different models of frequency would work in the city? For example, instead, we know that ghost buses and late buses are reality. And instead of relying on these posted times at the stop, is there any consideration of like moving to a model where people can expect, okay, the bus will show up every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes, right? Every 5 minutes, whatever it is. I know other jurisdictions are using similar models. So have we considered those kinds of models? And if not, why not?
Councillor, do you want me to say a few words about that? Okay, thanks.
Please go ahead.
Thanks very much for the question. It is something that we think about frequently. The history in Ottawa has made it not as easy an option to choose as in, say, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. One reason for that is that it's a very old historic reason, that because Ottawa had a bus-based rapid transit system for so many years, we needed to limit the number of buses that were passing through downtown Ottawa. We were running 180 to 200 buses per hour per direction down Albert and Slater streets, and about maybe 120 an hour in each direction on Rideau Street. And the decision that councils made and that the staff had to implement, really starting from the 80s, was to handle that volume by buying bigger buses. So that's why we bought so many of the two-piece articulated buses, and then over the last 12 years, also the double-decker buses that you see. And these are buses that carry more people, so they don't take up as much road space didn't take up as much road space on Albert and Slater during rush hours. But what that means is that our unit of comparison then is not 40, 50 people on a bus, it becomes 70, 80, 90 people on a bus. And that resulted in buses being less frequent on routes all over the city. And that when those routes fracture apart, it's a bus every 20 seconds there was a bus every 20 seconds on Albert Street. But when you get beyond Herdman Station and beyond Saint Laurent Station, when those buses start branching out, that became then a bus every 15 minutes or every 20 minutes, where it might have been every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes if we had been using the smaller 40-foot buses. So compare that to Toronto and Montreal, where they've had a train-based rapid transit system in place for many, many years, and their default size of bus is smaller, so therefore they need to run more frequently. And so what that all resulted in is that's what our budget basis is. Our budget is based on having buses that carry more people. They're bigger buses. And so our default, what makes a route frequent in Ottawa has really been about every 15 minutes, whereas in Toronto it's every 10 minutes, in Montreal it's every 8 minutes. And there's a lot of difference, obviously, between 8 minutes and 15 minutes, and whether people are willing to just walk out to the street and wait for a bus, as people who are near a transitway station or no train station do, or people who need to know the time and need to get confirmation of that time and walk out to a bus stop not for a bus will be along in a few minutes, but I'm going to catch a bus at 7:20 this evening. And that's just where we've been. To change that means a big change in the funding model. And, that's some of the tough decisions that all the councillors will be making over the next few months and few years.
Thank you for that answer. I think the next raised hand is Zina.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, everybody, for letting us to see our result for the survey. We usually, when we do the city send us the survey, we don't see the result, and we don't know what's going on. But this time we got a chance to see the result, and our voice and what we say is heard. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions. The one is, I live at Water Ridge Village area. We requested bus number Route 17 to come back, which is, I think we wrote a lot of story about our community. So that one is still in your hands. So we waited that. We hope you'll release. The second question is, Montreal Road, we have a student who goes to De La Salle and Lisker Public School as well. And some of them, they go Galatian as well. But De La Salle and Lisker is the high school student. The high school student, they need to be at school on time. They have to be very fresh when they start in the class. It takes them to a couple of, more than 50 minutes to get there. Now, the city, we ask you the 17, but the city, they play the tic-tac, also transfer, and they say, okay, we're gonna take number 12. And instead of number 12 goes to the Saint Laurent, so we can take number 12 all the way to downtown. How about the Saint Laurent? We have a Palazzo Saint Laurent. We don't have any bus that goes to Montreal Road and turn into the Saint Laurent to the left and goes to the school, the other school, Elizabeth and Queen Elizabeth, the Palazzo for the shopping center, Palazzo. We don't have that bus. They also transport, they cut number 12. At the number 12, since they take number 12 to downtown, it doesn't come very often. So that, I don't think that's the right for the neighborhood. I ask you also transport staff 1 day, 2 days, 3 days during the winter, when it's minus 40, I wanted they take the bus and see how we're suffering for the taking the bus. The third question is Route 27. It goes to locals in our area, the peak hours, like the rush hour. It stopped Borovender and Wakinaki. It doesn't pick up anyone. And I don't know why they make that stop. I'm very close to that area. My child goes to all the way Mackinac and Wanaki, and there's no shelter. We wait there. Sometimes it doesn't show up during the winter. We stay 30 minutes sometimes outside. Those areas, they have no shelter. And the bus stopped 27, stopped Borovender and Wakinaki and Wanaki, and it doesn't pick up anyone. It just stop there and say, I'm sorry, I can't pick you up. I only drop off. So I just want to also transport as council, our city councilors, to think about the riders, the people who are riding the bus. We are in need. And I see the 70%, when they say the 70%, the riders, the children are under 18 years, so they didn't participate for the survey. So if they participated, it will be right for the 300 and 400. So think about it. We are human beings. We need to be respect. We need to be listen. We have to get what we have a right to have it. Thank you so much.
We appreciate your comments and your questions. Just want you to know that in the last budget process, that was one of the reasons why I worked with the Water Ridge Village Community Association to move a motion around restoration of service in Water Ridge Village. That examination will be part of the transit optimization exercise that is being undertaken by OC Transpo. So that's why it's important for you to provide these comments, but I fully agree with you. I know that Councillor Plante agrees with you in terms of access to school routes. I think of myself, and with myself, it's just geography. So often I will take the bus to City Hall, but it's actually faster for me to walk. And often when I walk through Councillor Plante's beautiful ward, and I walk through the grounds of Lisgar. And so I've heard that concern from other parents that it takes their children a tremendous amount of time because of the commute, and the commute being indirect. So that's one of the issues that we want to raise and to obviously bring to OC Transpo staff for consideration as bus routes are being looked at. As for the existing bus routes in Wateridge Village, there was an ask, especially by the people who live in Veterans House for some more service. So that's one of the reasons why we made a request to OC Transpo for increased frequency, and we saw that so that the veterans who live in that building could undertake more errands. But we have heard very clearly, I just want you to know, from residents and the community association that there is a request for restoration of routes and also for greater frequency. So we will have that discussion with staff. And I think the next person who has their hand raised is Sam.
Thank you very much for hosting this town hall. My question is a bit two parts, and it has to do with, sorry, I'm a Sandy Hill resident, and I'm a public servant who has fallen somewhat victim to the blanket mandate to return to the office 2 days of work in Gatineau. So on one of the slides, one of the gaps in coverage that was identified was interprovincial. And I just wanted to add my 2 cents to that, to say that a big part of that is the lack of integration between STO and OC Transpo. And I feel like we're just missing out on an opportunity to recapture public servants that are going back to the office, because there's a lack of a hybrid pass. There was some discussion that that's something that might be offered. And I just feel like the lack of integration between STO and OC Transpo is an issue that existed pre-pandemic. And that's something that we would love to see resolved. But I would love to see that opportunity seized to reclaim some of those returning to office workers with some kind of hybrid paths. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I don't know if Pat wants to briefly comment on that.
Sure. Thanks, Councillor. I can say a couple of things. One, the idea of the hybrid pass, or a pass that's aimed at people who travel regularly but not as frequently, is a task that's been assigned to us by the Transit Commission, and our technical teams are working on that now, and we will be reporting back to the Transit Commission with what we find. On integration between STO and OC Transpo, we're very proud of the strong integration that the two networks have and have had for 40, 50 years. We're the only place really where a fare paid on one system is valid for a complete trip on both systems. So there's never a need for someone to pay a second fare. Every STO bus that crosses into Ottawa makes a very good connection with our network at Lion Station, and some of them also make connections at Waller Street at the University, at Mackenzie King Bridge. But for people who are going from particular locations in Ottawa to particular locations in Gatineau, we certainly understand that the connections aren't always perfect. The other small thing I'll say is that we do need to respect that just as OC Transpo is a City of Ottawa service, governed by decisions made in the city of Ottawa. The STO is a Gatineau municipal and Quebec provincial service. And therefore the politics on the political decisions that are made on each side of the river in the two municipalities or in the two provinces don't always align with each other. But I think all of the people on both of the governing bodies and all the people that work at both transit agencies are quite proud of the strong integration and the strong collaboration that the two systems have.
Thank you for that. And I think the next hand that's raised is Dylan's.
Not sure if everybody can hear me, if my headphones are acting weird. Sometimes they do. Just hi, I'm a Water Ridge Village resident. I want to just briefly make a comment and a question. The comment is specific to a factor that I think is probably missing from this discussion, and I could be wrong. I'd be open to hearing feedback on this about not just kind of the operations of transit, but some of the bigger kind of urban planning decisions we make when we're redesigning streets and how that actually has an impact on reliability. I'm not going to wax poetic, but I will get into that. And the second thing is I want to ask a question about the definition of reliability. So I don't think it's a secret that buses get stuck in traffic. It's really frustrating to see, people in single occupancy vehicles kind of holding up a bus that's potentially full with 20, 30, 40 people that could be moving a lot faster with dedicated bus lanes, dedicated signals, whatever it may be. I'm thinking specifically of sort of some of the plans that I've seen around sort of Blair and Montreal Road, and how, yes, we're going to make that a transit priority corridor, but we haven't set dedicated bus lanes the whole way. It's kind of like bus lane skips. And it's like, that's okay. That's better than what is there today. But to me, it's unambitious. And it's sort of saying, like, we have an opportunity in redoing this street to really, really fix reliability and give transit kind of the dedicated space that it needs. But instead, we're kind of taking a half measure to sort of appease. And I guess the comment broadly that I want to make is, like, I haven't seen like solid acknowledgement politically that, like, we will actually, in order to make transit more reliable, we actually will need to make it less convenient to drive. Like, it can't just be, we're going to make it better for everybody. Like, at some point we need to actually say, like, this is just going to actually have to actively make it less convenient to drive in order to make it more convenient for other modes of transit. It becomes a geometry problem. Like, we just can't move that many people in cars. I'm going to stop waxing poetic and ask my question. My question is, when we're talking about reliability and we're benchmarking reliability for staff, is it fair to say that we're benchmarking reliability today with the assumption that buses will get stuck in traffic?
I'll let Pat kind of take on the technical element of that question. I would just, in terms of your introduction, in terms of the need for bus lanes, of course, we had that environmental assessment undertaken on Montreal Road, and we're also going to do that for the St. Laurent corridor. The challenge also is not just around ambition, to be blunt. It's also technical challenges and property challenges. A number of briefings I had about uncooperative property owners in the right of way or next to the right of way to get access to that land, to have the bus lane was pretty extensive. And so I just want you to know that there are multiple dimensions to this. It's not that staff was not trying to ensure that they could have that right of way for buses. There are just many different elements that come into play, including those around property owners. So it's not that there wasn't any attempt by staff. I actually saw that they were making the overtures. It was just a lot of negotiation. The other element to note is that there is some malleability to some of these plans. I mean, it's one thing for us to have the EA. The next step is funding it, and then often, if we're looking at a longer time horizon, that will mean that we will have to, take a look or refresh some of the things that we have looked at. Of course, that's a fresh EA, and I'm not going to turn down any transit priority or improvements for pedestrians, which are in that plan around Den Haag, for example, that I've heard from residents. But I just wanted you to know a little bit about the complexity. So it's not just staff not being ambitious, it's just a question of some of the constraints, both legal and technical that are there. And now I'll turn it over to Pat. Sorry about that.
Oh, thanks, Councillor. There's three basic measures that we use when we're reporting on, when we're assessing for ourselves and when we're reporting on reliability of service. The first one is, was the trip delivered? The trip that should be leaving, right now at 7:29 out of Saint Laurent Station on Route 40, let's say, did it run? Yes or no? That's the first measure, and we aggregate those. We run about 8,400 bus trips a day, and we count up, and if we, how many of them did we deliver? And right now we're running, around high 98s, but not reliably over 99% of those trips being delivered, which is a lot of trips. Out of 8,400 trips a day, if we don't deliver 1%, that's 84 trips not being delivered. So we're trying to drive that up. This is what the hiring more staff and getting the buses more reliable is all about, is to drive that up to 99.5% service delivery. The next two measures we use are related to whether the service is more frequent or less frequent. For the routes or the times of day when we're running less frequently than every 15 minutes, we're looking at, did the trip run on time, not more than 1 minute early, not more than 5 minutes late from that time. If it's in that window, on time. If it's outside that window, either more than 1 minute early or more than 5 minutes late, then it's late, and we count it that way, and we know we have to do diagnostic and then repair work either on the streets or on the schedule. For the more frequent routes, we have a more complex calculation, which ties into the same calculation that we use on the trains, and that's about how much longer did a customer have to wait than they should have had to wait. We count the average waiting time. If the buses had all been on their planned time, they should have waited this long. How much longer than that did they wait on average? And the higher that gets, then the more attention we need to pay to getting that service to run more reliably.
Thank you so much. And I think the next person with their hand up is Dominic.
Hi there. Thank you so much for organizing this. I'm wondering, with the acknowledgement that we're sort of moving away from a transit system oriented for 9 to 4, 9 to 5 workers, the bus lanes that were just discussed, a lot of them are just for rush hour times. So in the morning, at the peak, and at the afternoon peak. Would it be possible, has there been any discussion about expanding that throughout the day, in the evening, like all night long, because people are moving at all times of the day?
I would just briefly say that I think that, one of the things that surprised me in the survey was the fact that work wasn't number one. Errands was number one. And I think we're seeing more diversity of use. So you're absolutely right. And I think that is a discussion that we will see politically at Transit Commission. I know that I don't sit on Transit Commission, but watching some of the debates, I know that is some of the direction we're going in terms of discussion to see what makes the most sense in terms of the way that infrastructure is utilized and laid out. The other element, in my estimation, really as well is the debate and the dialogue that will be undertaken by the process that OC Transpo will outline at the end of our town hall. And so we will need to hear from residents about their usage, and we'll also need to align that with data to see how those patterns are changing. But anecdotally, I'm hearing that the patterns are changing. I'm hearing that from communities wanting greater interconnection, as example, with shopping centers, shopping districts, so that they can do errands. And that's why I thought it was very interesting that we had that correlation in our non-scientific survey, of course, but that we saw a correlation in terms of people shifting their use for transit. The last thing I'll leave you with is I'm really excited about that, because I think that we were typically defined by people simply going to work. It was a commuter system, a feeder system from the suburbs. I think there's actually a new opportunity if people are wanting to access routes and service so that they can travel within their neighborhoods. I think that that's just excellent, because that hasn't traditionally been the way that the system has been used in Ottawa. So I think, there have been many negative aspects of the pandemic, but this is a very kind of interesting one in terms of the challenge that confronts us. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from residents over the process with with OC Transpo as they run a process of consultation, and the data to see how patterns are shifting. I think Marian has her hand raised next.
Sorry, there are all these pop-ups of me getting unmuted while trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me now? Okay.
We can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, so thank you very much to the councillors for organizing this survey and this meeting. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide input on transit. I'm currently a resident of Vanier, was a resident of Sandy Hill before that, and it's a great point you were just raising, Rawlson, about the changing nature of trips in this post-pandemic era. But I don't think it's just a post-pandemic situation. I think this has always been a limitation of Ottawa's transit system, that it was, as you said, very long distance commuting focused and really not serving residents of neighborhoods that could be more transit oriented than they currently are, and where neighborhoods where often people don't have cars or don't have access to a car. I'm very fortunate that I'm able-bodied and relatively well off, and so I can afford to hop on my bike or take a taxi or even walk faster than the bus when I need to get somewhere and the bus isn't coming. But that's not a privilege everyone has, and it's definitely not something I had access to when I had my broken leg 2 years ago, for example. And suddenly you realize the limitations of not being able to get around. And I would argue that particularly now that a lot of work is remote, it is much more important to worry about people being able to get their groceries, to be able to socialize, see friends, see family, to be able to go to key destinations. So I guess my question would be, is OC Transpo considering a broader origin destination survey study to inform transit route design? Because my experience of transit routes is I have a great connection to my office because I happen to work downtown. But to get anywhere else, I have to go on a tour of the entire LRT every time I want to go from A to B, even if my A and B are both not on the LRT. And then my other question, and maybe this is a bit of a harebrained idea that isn't really possible, but I would hope it would be, is would it be possible, since a lot of things move by doing pilots and, kind of tests that aren't really, set as long-term investments because people are scared of, a big long-term expenditure, would it be possible to pick a neighborhood that is, let's say relatively high transit use already, and provide that neighborhood with really, really good transit service? Like, do everything we can to have that neighborhood to have the best connections, the most reliable service, maybe have information sessions for people on how to use transit, the availability of transit in their neighborhood, something like that, and then see what the results are. Like, can we actually get a modal shift out of that? Do you get more use of transit? And then could that help fund, improved service all around for a longer period if you have better use? So sorry, that was two relatively large questions, but yeah.
No problem, and we'll direct them to staff.
So on the first question, yes, the city has done an extensive origin destination survey. In fact, we cooperated with, it's not just the city, but also the Ville de Gatineau, the province of Ontario, the province of Quebec, the National Capital Commission, all cooperating on a big regional study where many phone calls been made to many households all across to build a statistically good model of where people are traveling to and from, what times of day and how they're traveling. And this is particularly useful to us because it's a new survey that's just been taken in the last few months. So it reflects a lot of the pandemic influenced travel patterns and pandemic influenced journey to work habits and needs. Maybe not the latest ones, as the federal government changes their requirements for people who work for them to attend the office, but it gives us a very good moment in time and much better than the previous one. So that's part of the big work that Councillor King's referred to a couple of times and that we'll be talking more about later, and that we'll be inviting you to be part of. On the second question, is it possible? Yes, it's possible to have a pilot project where a neighborhood gets whatever it is, super saturated with transit service. The question is that the question that council would make is that an appropriate use of public funds? Is it how is it equitable? How do you choose that neighborhood against others? And our ongoing question about all pilot projects is what do you do with the pilot project if the conclusion is that it was not successful? Because then you have to dismantle something that you've done. So is it possible? Yes. Is it something that council's going to decide to do? That's not something I could predict.
Thank you for that answer. And the next person with their hand raised is Peter.
Hi, thanks. I've lived in 4 wards. I've participated in 3 train studies. I've now recently lived in 2 of them, Ariel's and Stephanie's. So I'd like to talk about things we haven't really talked about so far. And it's around planning, leadership, and culture. When are we going to have planners that actually understand the needs of the users and the users that have been lost? I mean, it's a lot of people have exited because it's proven to them that it's not safe, it's not reliable. There's no reason for them to be there. So they're not there anymore, quite apart from telecommuting and so on, which is an important thing. We've chosen a general manager whose #1 experience is bus customer service in Montreal. Well, our #1 problems aren't bus problems in Montreal or in Ottawa. It's the trains. It's the damn trains. So why aren't we attending to making sure that we have staff that understand that, oh, if you don't move the snow, you can't get the wheelchair through the snowdrift. There's no seamless attention here. And it feels like we're in a 100-year-old train system. It's decaying already. The corruption is obvious with the substandard materials and trains. Is that going to change? It's not just a city disgrace, it's a national disgrace, the way the Parliament and Rideau stations smell. I've not really heard any, there were some noises at the beginning, but that's quite gone down, but not the smell, that's for sure. The road staff still think that bike lanes are gutters, so those don't get cleaned. There's really no understanding by many of the staff, road workers, that they have to pay attention to the way that people travel. And I haven't heard any, any attempts to retrain or rethink or any of that. So that's my worry and my plea. Thank you.
I would just say to that I think that this new council is really dedicated to really addressing and pursuing solutions to the challenges that our transit system has had. I mean, just today, we received an action plan at council that looks at the recommendations from the LRT inquiry. So, there is real interest and a real pursuit around the council table for solutions. I would also say that there's a real interest in terms of city staff addressing this issue. Like I said, I don't sit on Transit Commission, but I've seen Miss Amilcar on multiple occasions saying that she's putting on her engineering cap and that they want to really exercise oversight where possible over the consortium to ensure that a value is delivered through the mechanism of service delivery. Do we all probably agree with the method of service delivery? I can't speak for my colleagues. I wasn't there to vote on phase one, but I had said very clearly, I didn't think that transit as a service was probably the best model for delivery. But the system that we have in place is what we have in place. And I can tell you that people are dedicated at both the staff level and at council to ensure that we get this right. And that we really work through this period of transition, because that's what it is. We're transitioning from a BRT system to an LRT system. That's never been done in North America, to my understanding. There are technical challenges that you're absolutely right, boggle the mind and have made me frustrated over the previous term. But I think the good news is that there are mechanisms in place, including a subcommittee of council that will deal with LRT issues, and that there is regular reporting, and we're looking at ways of enhancing reporting, accountability, and transparency at Transit Commission. Like I said, I don't sit on the commission, but I've been watching it very carefully over the last 6 months, and I've seen a lot of oversight in terms of the questions that are being asked about technologies and the interventions that staff are taking to address challenges. So at the end of the day, I'm going to be optimistic of, it is definitely a massive technological and implementation challenge that staff and council is trying to provide oversight over, but I know that at a certain point, technological challenges can be overcome, but it does require a tremendous amount of oversight and transparency and accountability, and I think that that's what we're really pushing for. So I just want you to know that. I know all my other colleagues who I talk to, they would rather not get calls about something not working. I think the reality is that the approach that we have to take is to ensure that we are provided quality services for the investment that we're making and that we're going to continue to make. So I just, at a political level, I think we're all dedicated to that cause, and we want to work hand in hand with staff to ensure that we get there.
Yeah, and there's just two things I want to say. First of all, when I first came into this job, the first question I asked to Renee Amilcar was, if this maintenance group and the city are suing the pants off of each other, what is the operational relationship? This is when lawsuits were ongoing, right? And she responded, and I've seen evidence that since she's come in, she's really repaired the operational relationship with RTG, and the city's put a lot of pressure, and RTG has hired on staff to deal with a lot of the challenges that have happened in the last couple of years. Again, I am just as frustrated as you are, but I do think her technical knowledge in that relationship she's created has made a difference. And, I'm from Toronto, where the subway's breaking down all the time. It's no excuse when it happens. But I think, I hope that what we'll start to see is something more typical of another city of our size. But the other thing I'll say is that something that I learned when I came into this job and learned more about the challenges with the LRT. This is a really specialized set of skills, and there's only so many people across the country that know how to do it. And there's also so many other cities that are building out train systems. So it does leave us in a bit of a challenging position because we don't have the in-house capacity. The knowledge is exceptionally specialized. So that's why I think that Renee and OC Transpo have really focused on repairing that relationship. I'm feeling more optimistic because I think we do have much stronger insight. And again, none of us three voted for stage one. We were not around. We did not choose this contractor. I don't know, Pat, if you want to speak to this, but my sense is that even though it's really easy to be, I mean, look, I was watching it on Twitter just like you were when people were stuck in train stations, you know, shortly after the train opened. But I think we are seeing less of that. And we have much more oversight. And I'll tell you, I've seen incredible discipline from this new council in terms of the kind of accountability they're demanding from staff, not just on this file, but on every file. So, you know, with all due respect to staff who I inherently think work incredibly hard. But I think what I took from the LRT inquiry is that it's council that has the ultimate fiduciary responsibility and legal responsibility for the transit system, and we need to make sure it works. And we can't just delegate that away.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I see Johan has his hand raised as well.
Bonsoir et un grand merci d'avoir organisé cette soirée et aussi l'enquête que vous avez faite. Nous et ma famille, nous, on avait choisi Manor Park pour venir vivre ici presque 15 ans passés, et parce que la ligne 7 nous donnait une bonne connexion, on pensait, avec la ville, avec l'école de nos enfants qui est de la salle, et aussi avec le centre Saint-Laurent qui nous pouvait donner avec le bus rapide dans ce temps-là d'autres connexions. J'ai deux questions spécifiquement et un grand merci à Monsieur Pat. Je ne sais pas comment je dois dire votre nom en anglais, votre nom de famille, je m'excuse, mais je vous remercie pour l'explication que vous avez déjà donnée. J'ai une question spécifique. Si j'ai bien compris la nouvelle, la ville va électrifier ses bus. Est-ce qu'on va choisir des bus de 30, 40 clients ou des bus de 60 clients comme actuellement? Parce que votre réponse avait dit que c'est à cause du fait qu'on a autant de longues bus, le temps entre les bus est juste 15 minutes et pas 8 comme à Montréal. Et je pense que l'électrification des bus est éventuellement une opportunité d'avoir des bus plus petites. Le LRT fait l'autre travail et on pouvait éventuellement avoir des bus qui vont rouler plus régulièrement. Deuxième chose, vous disiez qu'il y avait à peu près 84 bus qui ne pouvaient pas rouler par jour sur les 8400. Chez nous, les gens qui utilisent le numéro 7, on pense qu'il y en a quand même beaucoup de numéros 7 qui sont annulés par jour. Où se trouvent ces 84 bus qui sont annulés par jour? Est-ce que c'est ici, dans le downtown de notre ville, ou est-ce que c'est un petit peu partout dans la ville? Ça, c'est ma question. I can also ask them in English if you want. First of all, thank you. No, it works.
Oh yes.
You can answer in English. You can answer
Merci.
in English if French is not your easy language. Mais si vous parlez le français, j'aimerais que vous l'utilisez aussi. Merci.
Thank you, Councillor. Should I answer? And I apologize. It's I do understand and I can speak slow French, but I can't speak very well about transit en français. So thank you for tolerating my incomplete bilingualism. The electric buses that are on the market today and that are reliable and that will operate over the range of distance that we require in Ottawa are all the standard size 40-foot buses. The buses that the buses, when you see them on Route 7, are the small buses, the ones that have 35, 40 seats and that do not have the hinge in the middle. Right now we have 4 of them as a pilot. We have approval from council and funding to buy another 26 this year, and we're waiting for some important contractual steps and before we enter into negotiations with the builders, but they should likely be here. Another 26 should be here next year. So by then we'll have 30. The decision of council is that we will buy only electric buses from here forward. The confirmation of that is that we have a financial way to do that. They're very expensive, the battery electric buses, very expensive. But we have a funding arrangement with the federal government that covers us up to 2027. So we know how we're going to get the first 300 or 400 purchased. And then there will be another step beyond that, another financial decision to be made. The second question, I'll go back to the reasons that we fail to deliver trips. Sometimes it's a shortage of staff, and that we're addressing by hiring more bus operators. Sometimes it's a mechanical failure in the bus, and that we address by having more licensed mechanics and stronger warranty relationships with the bus manufacturers. And sometimes it's things that happen, which we just call on-street occurrences, things that happen when the bus is on the road. That could be a broken down car in front of them. That could be a customer being sick on the bus. That could be a great range of things. And what makes the geographic difference is that a shortage of operators will be equally felt across all of the city. A mechanical breakdown of the bus will be equally felt all over the city, except that if there's a part of the bus that is stressed at a point where it accelerates, like a transmission, that might happen in a more of a stop and go area. But when things happen on the street, like fires and collisions and detours and construction, that's going to happen in the busier parts of the city because there's more activity going on. So that might mean that when those things randomly occur, those things that we can plan for only in generality and not in specifics, they might happen more on a street like Beechwood than on a street like Greenbank. And the final thing is that there is more transit service in your area than there is in South Orleans or Canada West or certain parts of Nepean. There just is more transit service. I think, I'm not positive of this, so please don't, I know this is being recorded, so I'll say right now, I don't know this to be 100% true, but I think something like 1/4 of all the transit service that we provide in the city is in this area. And something like 1/4 of all the transit customers who travel in Ottawa are in this area. And so if things are going to happen randomly, they're more often going to happen where there's more activity happening as a base. The percentages are about the same. When we say we're delivering 97, 98, 99, 99.5% of the service, that's pretty much the same everywhere. The slight difference is that when our controllers in the control center are faced with, I've got one bus, I've got 2 problems to fix, or I've got 3 buses and I've got 6 problems to fix, they will always favor fixing a problem that goes on a school trip over a route that's more frequent where there will be another bus along in a few minutes. So if there's a choice between, I only have one resource, I need to fix a bus that runs from Earl Armstrong Bell High School, or to run one more bus on Bank Street, the decision will be take the less frequent service, fix that one, because on Bank Street, there will be another bus along in 5 minutes or 7 minutes. It's not perfect, but it does. So those are the only 2 things that distort the overall averages. And I thank everyone else for your indulgence as I gave this long answer.
Thank you so much, Pat. And we have one last question, one last hand raised, and that's from Hafsa. And after that, we'll invite OC Transpo to provide a brief presentation on the route review survey. But we'll now go to Hafsa.
Thank you so much for organizing this meeting. I would just like to say that I'm a daily bus. I take the bus constantly, and so as well as my family members, we're constantly taking the bus primarily for work and for our jobs. And so we live near the Montreal area, and so it was now that the buses have changed and that we have the 12 Blair and the 12 Parliament. It's incredibly inconvenient for us to go to 12 Blair, for us to go to Herdman or anywhere else. We've thrived on taking the 12 the 12 Saint Laurent to get to Saint Laurent, and also just stops in between. So it was quite difficult because the commute to taking the 12 Blair all the way to Blair exceeded an hour for me, and it was a lot of traffic in that area, a lot of school students, a lot of it's just a very busy area, especially. So I would just encourage that you reconsider at least changing, back to the original bus route of having the 12 Saint Laurent going to Saint Laurent. If not, also making the 27 Wateridge more frequent rather than an express bus, as well as having the 12 or 27 Wateridge going on the other Saint Laurent, ending at Saint Laurent. That would be great as well, super convenient. It's just that it feels like a delay every time that we take the 12 Blair. And I do encourage that you kind of change that bus route, because it is a really, really big loss. I find, if not making the 27 Saint Laurent and Wateridge much more frequent, that'd be great.
We appreciate those comments, and just want you to know I've heard from many residents in Wateridge Village as well as the community association, and now you're actually going to learn how to provide even more comments in the sense directly to OC Transpo through a presentation on the route review survey. I believe Scott might be addressing this, so I'll invite Scott to just provide a short presentation.
Thank you so much, Councillor. And I think that there was a slide one slide that we were going to get put up there. So thank you, Aaron, for that. And thank you so much for sharing thoughtful feedback within the survey that the councillors shared. As was mentioned, the feedback was shared directly with us, and we take that, we're taking every one of those comments and reviewing and to better understand the survey data and how our customers are feeling. So I'll just start out by saying that OC Transpo is managing and improving service by analyzing data. So this fits in perfect with the way that we're working. We're using our key performance indicators to track our progress as we are making improvements over time. We're very committed to transparency and recognize its importance when providing safe, comfortable, convenient, and reliable transit service. So you've heard through tonight, through the various questions, reference to the consultation and the project work that we're doing around our route review survey. So again, we're committed to delivering the best possible service to customers. And we recognize that the way that customers use transit has changed. That's why we were embarking on this very important route review process. Since the beginning of COVID-19, there have been significant changes to how often and how many customers use transit. Councillor King made the comment again around through this survey process, the number one transit use not being work, it's being to run errands. So that's evident that there's been big changes since the pandemic. We also have the opening of stage 2 O train extensions. So this is our new train that will open this fall that runs north-south within the city, and then future extensions of our O train line 1 to both the east and the west. So with these, with all this change that's happening, there's a need to review our service planning principles that we'll use to shape our bus route network to better match customer travel patterns. The work will also include, with our consultant and contractor, Dillon Consulting, a look at benchmarking our service planning principles against transit industry best practices. Once the route review process is complete, OC Transpo will recommend updates to its service planning framework. This will guide potential changes to our route networks in 2024 and beyond based on the changes that I had identified earlier. So for route review, the work will consist of multiple phases as service planning principles are reviewed and potential adjustments are made to the route network. It's very important, and we look forward to each and every one of you getting involved. You could do so by completing the process that by following the QR code that is on the screen or through the link to our website. We're also planning public open houses where you could come and share your experiences, much like you did here tonight. These open houses are being planned through the month of May. We're going to plan an open house in the east end of the city at in an Orleans location, followed by, so that will be on May 17th. On May 23rd, we're going to have an open house that's virtual through a Zoom link using this exact same platform here. And then open house May 24th in the west end of the city at Nepean Sportsplex. And finally, May 31st, Town Hall open house at City Hall. So really look forward to hearing more from the community in regards to the future of our transit system. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, for that. And thank you, Pat, also for your extensive contributions and interventions tonight in terms of questions being answered by residents. I want to, before I say goodnight, I'm going to give an opportunity to my council colleagues and friends to also say a few words as we wrap up this town hall. But before we go, or before I leave, I personally want to thank you for attending. Thank OC Transpo staff for the amount of work that they're doing and the listening that they're undertaking. Residents, please feel free to continue to reach out to us. The information that you are leaving in the chat, we will analyze and will respond to you if you leave some contact information. And most importantly, I want to really thank collectively our office staff members. They really ensured that this all came together. It's very busy in our offices, but people were working on this on the sides of their desks, and we just want to really acknowledge the hard work that our staff put into the survey and to providing a very useful a survey, I think, that provides a lot of anecdotal information to us. And of course, as usual, please continue to contact our offices. Provide us email. We're receiving email all the time in terms of your concerns around transit and other issues. But I'd just like to say thank you, and I will toss it to my other colleagues to also say goodnight.
Guess I can go next because on my screen, I'm right beside you, Rawlson. I'm not sure if I'm beside you on everyone else's screen. I just want to thank everybody for coming. I really enjoyed being able to listen and to absorb all of the challenges that you're having with transit. It really just confirms a lot of what we've already been hearing. But the message is really clear. Kids need to get to school, people need to get to work, and we all want to get to our basic amenities and not feel that either if we don't have a car that we're disadvantaged or that we have no choice but to have one. And so I find downtown, we have a little bit more of a walkable neighborhood, but we don't just stay in a 5-block radius. We do want to go other places in the city. So thank you so much for everybody to be here. And also thank you so much, Pat. And thank you so much to our office staff, as Councillor King said. And, you know, what I'm learning working at the city is some of these challenges are systemic, and some of the reasons why those systemic challenges exist is because of poor decisions made by council. So this is really helpful for us to know what to advocate for at the table. And a lot of the time comes down to money, comes down to tax revenue. If we want a reliable service, we need to fund it. So that is what I'm going to be taking with me, and I hope to keep listening. And particularly if you live in Somerset Ward and you didn't feel that you wanted to speak tonight, but you still have something to say, please do email our office. We're very happy to continue the conversation.
Oui, merci beaucoup d'être là ce soir. Je voulais aussi remercier tout le monde qui a mis des commentaires dans le chat. Franchement, j'ai trouvé le chat super excitant, palpitant. Vraiment, vous avez fait de très beaux commentaires. Il y avait des liens à des articles et à des initiatives dans des autres villes. Alors, j'apprécie beaucoup tout le monde qui a contribué dans ce coin-là. Comme on dit la conseillère Troster et King, si vous avez des commentaires, des enjeux dont vous voulez discuter, vous pouvez toujours faire contact avec mon bureau. Comme j'ai expliqué, nous, on a des enjeux aussi qui transigent, disons, dans les autres quartiers, surtout avec les écoles secondaires. Alors, je suis toujours contente de faire des liens avec les autres conseillers, conseillères et avec les conseillers scolaires dans ce cas-là. Alors, je vous souhaite à tous et à toutes une belle soirée et merci d'être là et merci surtout à la conseillère Troster et le conseiller King, parce que quand je leur ai approché avec l'idée pour notre rencontre avec nous trois ensemble, ils ont tout de suite dit oui, ils étaient partants dès le début. Alors, je suis très reconnaissant qu'ils sont là avec moi parmi nous ce soir. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, everybody.